Welcome to today's masterclass, everyone. We are brought to you by Profit Master Global Outsourcing, providing premium offshoring solutions. My name is Paul Jansz, and it's a pleasure to have you all here today as we've got a massive show. We'll be with you for about an hour, maybe just under an hour now. We'll work it till about 1 o'clock Eastern time. And we're going to talk about everything with regards to eCrime, cybersecurity, cyber threats. We're going to touch on what happened 10 days ago. That wasn't a cyber threat, but what happened and how can you prevent it from happening again? I know when I was just chatting to my guest before, it was actually really interesting to, quite sure how I can, hang on, let me just check to make sure someone's just popped in. I don't know how they managed to pop in. If you can just please, I'm not sure how that actually happened. How did that happen, James? The beauty of doing live television, let's call it. So you saw someone pop in. I don't know how they got on this because you can only get on with the panelist link and you're the only one that had that. So we'll get back to that. That threw me out a little bit. So yeah, we're going to talk about even the things that happened with CrowdStrike even 2 weeks ago and how can you prevent that from happening to your business. It was a Friday, luckily at 4 o'clock. Didn't affect my little business. I was out on the footy field with the kids, but they're the sorts of things that we're going to talk about today. Now, if you're joining us for the first time, this masterclass series, it was all born out of a 6-part podcast series that I started with Profit Master's CEO and founder, Richard Croker. We started it a couple of years ago. We thought we'll talk about all sorts of things to do with people and mastering profit through people. And then we decided, you know what, we'll take this to the next level. Let's make it a live series. Let's make it a masterclass series. And that's what we're bringing to you right now. If you've missed anything, because these are monthly, if you've missed anything in the past, just jump onto our YouTube page, type in Profit Master Global Outsourcing, and up will pop up the content, including a new panel series. I started a new panel series last week. I think it was last week with Richard Croker and Derek Gallimore. Now, we spoke about everything to do with offshoring and how you can actually start preparing yourself to build a global workforce. And it was an amazing panel series. So that was our first show last week. Again, that is all on our YouTube page. So check it out. That's probably the most important thing. It's free content for you, for your team. It's there for you. Now, who is Profit Master Global Outsourcing? So Profit Master provides premium offshore solutions for you to build your global workforce. And this is a term that got used quite a bit. So I'm using it again in our panel series. I'm using it again today. Now, some of the comments that were made last week were interesting. So the comments were there's a saving of up to 60 to 70% on your employment costs, which is interesting alone. And then the guys also spoke about a 25 up to 25%, even more, depending on an increase in productivity. So again, if you're in the process of looking at what your global workforce or even your workforce looks like for financial year 25, chat to Delia McKenzie, or Delia will probably reach out anyway, and you can chat about how that mix can come into play for your business. I think it's a really important one. Now, let's talk about some of the statistics around our topic today. I'm going to reel some of these off. So the cloud environment, we know that, we've all moved to the cloud. I know there was a lot of pushback. I've been working in the accounting industry for probably 25 years. And I know being with the accountants that were very server-based businesses, they all got pushed to the cloud. But to give you a bit of an idea, cloud environment intrusions have increased by 75% year on year. 76% year-on-year increase in victims named on eCrime dedicated leak sites, which is, again, quite amazing. 84% of cloud intrusions were focused on eCrime. And this is an interesting one, a big jump in the numbers. Increase in malware activity up from 40% in 2019 up to 75% in 2023. Quite amazing statistics. Now, I could go on more, but I'm going to leave it up to our guest to talk about all the little bits and pieces as we talk about the global landscape in this cybercrime type of world that we're living in. Now, we also spoke about that 10 days ago, the whole world was shut down. I didn't think it could happen, actually, but the whole world was shut down due to a CrowdStrike update. How did it happen? Was it a threat? I don't think it was. let me introduce you to our guest and let's have a quick talk about that. James Hay, Director of CT Group. How are you?
Good. Thanks, Paul. Appreciate jumping on with you.
Mate, and thanks for being here. Now, let's talk about the CrowdStrike update to start off with. They're a massive company, obviously. How did that happen?
Yeah, look, I think the underlying concern is how susceptible the global Microsoft users are to a potential outage. CrowdStrike, pushed out an update that contrasted with Microsoft and ended up shutting down, and I think it was close to 4 million or more people got the blue screen of death. So it's something that when you're talking at that sort of level, you assume that they've done tests and obviously pushed out the update prior to pushing it out to all their clients. But obviously it opens us up to a further conversation of how susceptible are we as a global community in terms of, well, not so much cyber attacks, but in terms of outages and what the effect of retail, retail businesses, airlines, as we saw, what those effects are.
Yeah, agree. And it's a funny thing when you talk about the blue screen of death. I don't think I've seen the blue screen of death for 20 years. And like I mentioned, it didn't affect me, but yeah, retail and airlines, I know there were still people 5 days later still trying to get back into the country, which was quite amazing. Mate, before we get into the MasterClass, are you okay to share a little bit about you and CT Group as well?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, CT Group, we're a national IT brand or a national IT company. Our focus has shifted over the last probably 3 to 4 years from just a managed service provider to a managed security services provider. We provide everything from cloud services to obviously support with digital transformation, and then obviously the big topic today, security services. Further to that, we have certain products that we offer, like telephony, everything that is in place to manage and to, I guess, support in terms of an IT environment for any business firm out there.
Brilliant. And how long have you been with the company for?
4 years, just over 4 years.
Brilliant. I know you guys are doing some big things. I know you and your fellow directors are doing some fantastic things with big things on the horizon as well. And I'm looking forward to spending some time with you in the Philippines as well at the Profit Master Conference, which we'll talk about later. Mate, let's talk the eCrime landscape. Do you have some sort of, data to the costs incurred by businesses, ransom demands, email spams? Is that something that we can, let's kick off with some of the costs incurred by businesses?
Yeah, look, absolutely. I think so. We do quite a bit of work around what the Australian Securities Directorate has set as a framework for their Essential 8 modelling, and even just going off what the ASD saw last year is the average cost of cybercrime per report was up 14%, and what that means for, I guess, small businesses. The average cost per incident was $46,000. Medium businesses was around the $97,000 mark, and large business around $71,000. I think increased just year on year, and that's not even taking into account 2024. This is just 2023. There were almost, I think from memory, it was 72 or 77,000 cybercrime reports in 2022, and that was closer to 94,000 in 2023. So in terms of an uptick, it's something that we see, and I think from my business in particular, obviously there are many factors that we aim to mitigate, but in terms of the amount that we see from a spam perspective, from social engineering, from various I guess routes into either a business or individual, it's something that's becoming more and more prominent. And I think as a target, Australia largely being a relatively strong economic stance, we're a very hard target, or a very soft target for a lot of international crime syndicates.
Yeah. And I think, sometimes costs as well. I know I was talking to an accounting firm not long ago that got hacked, and it's also the time aspect to go in there and to work out exactly where they've been and how to. It's all time, and when you think about some of our industries, our professional services industries are all time based. It's a big cost, isn't it?
Well, I think that's one cost you can look at. The other cost is the impact of staffing as well. I think from an HR perspective, it impacts, and no one ever wants to be named as someone who's gone through a hacking event by any means, but you sort of see it in the papers every other week. Lawyers Weekly, I know, published one recently, and it's sort of ongoing. You kind of want to avoid that public profile of having a data leak.
Yeah, that's right. It doesn't do your brand any good, does it?
No.
No, that's right. Now we've all sort of moved into the world of, let's call it the world of automation. I couldn't even say it. So we're looking at how we can, because everything's so cloud-based, how can we automate and automate and automate, which obviously brings down our productivity and increases certain areas of what we can do with output. Can investment in automation help the immediate action of threats?
It's a good question. I wouldn't say it would help the immediate action. I'll probably go a little further and say, looking at tools that incorporate things like artificial intelligence a better way. I know similar to CrowdStrike, we have a tool that's called Sentinel-1, similar, well, not quite the same size of company, but very similar, but we see it as best in breed in terms of an endpoint detect and response measure. I think in terms of mitigating or I guess protecting your data, what it enables and what it does is it watches how a business practices, how it uses its environment, and if any machine was to log into that environment that isn't registered, it would automatically deploy a antivirus to that device for 30 days. But also, if it sees unregular, out of the ordinary activity, such as a data dump at 3 a.m., it would be able to shut that machine down if it sees it as being a potentially malicious attack. So I think maybe separate to automation is that sort of a tool. But I mean, automation is great from a productivity perspective, absolutely. I think from a cyber security perspective, the reports and I guess a large amount of what the ASD is sort of requiring is more so reporting, which is typically eyes on screens, making sure measures are in place. And we haven't, and I'm sure that there's probably a way over the future to automate these checks. But I think having that human eyes on screens to ensure that things are deployed as they're meant to be is a super important part of what's going to help mitigate any sort of potential risk.
Yeah. So talking about AI for a second, and there's no doubt we're probably just scratching the surface with artificial intelligence and the way that it's sort of come out the last 3 or 4 years, and what it's going to take place over the next 5 years is going to be quite amazing. There's talk of 200,000 new jobs for Australians. Is there anything more that we need to be aware of when it comes to the rise in AI technology with the rise in eCrime?
Look, I think in terms of AI, I mean, we're doing a lot of work with clients around certain AI tools at the moment. There's some really good ones out there. I think it's still in its infancy as much as it's progressed in the last few years. Even with things like Copilot, which is a great tool. Copilot, if it's not set up correctly, can have the ability to circumvent certain hardening measures that you might have on your Microsoft security or your Microsoft Office. So I think it's always good to exercise caution when looking at these certain products, but also speaking with your IT provider and your managed security provider around what they see as a potential risk. Because I know there's a lot that Microsoft's done in the background for Copilot Studio, which helps maintain that level of hardened security that you want to see. But it's still, I mean, again, it's still in its infancy. And I think over the next sort of 6-12 months, we'll see those sorts of technologies come in leaps and bounds.
Yeah, interesting. And there's, whether it be, let's say, a Fathom or a Otter AI that attaches to, let's say, Zoom, because we're using Zoom right now. So it attaches to Zoom and then it takes notes, file notes, those sorts of things. Certainly from a financial planning perspective, file notes are essential. Is there risk in that when they're attaching it to another software provider?
I think yes and no. I think I think it's dependent on the content. The risk is that potentially there's sensitive information that's being discussed or being taken in these applications or these software that could be then shared globally through that platform, or could be shared globally in this, when searched through AI. I think the risk mitigation is really around retaining or controlling that sensitive data, and I think that's what a large amount of these attacks are around. Is when we start talking through business emails being compromised and things, it's all to gain information.
Yes.
And that's what that's, I guess, the cost benefit from a hacker's perspective is to be able to sell that sensitive data.
Okay, it's probably something just to, again, I know a lot of people, we're sort of moving that way because, again, it increases our output by having AI to automate some of those notes and file notes and those sorts of things. So it's just something to be aware of and talk to your provider about, I suppose, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, let's talk data theft, extortion, optimization. How does it happen?
Look, from what we see through our business, and we work with a large amount of legal and accounting firms, is typically the most common practice outside of spam is social engineering. Social engineering could be, if you haven't as a business got your domain name locked down, you can have people pretending to purport as the CEO of an organization, as an example, and they can be emailing staff, clients, requesting certain details. I know there, and I won't mention by name, but there's been a few big accounting firms, insolvency firms that have had similar, I wouldn't say data breaches, but they've been convinced to transfer money at settlements of certain matters into the wrong accounts. So social engineering seems to be the most prevalent that we've seen. I mean, spam filtering is probably the most popular way. And I think from a mitigation perspective, and I'm sure that's where we're going to go with this conversation, but from a mitigation perspective and what we see from cyber insurance companies these days is human risk management, which is, simulated spam phishing, it's dark web monitoring, it's security awareness training. That seems to be sort of large on the list of, I guess, checkbox items to ensure that your staff are aware of these types of potential malicious attacks that requesting information via email. They're asking you to click out, log in, and authenticate via multi-factor, things like that, and just being aware of it. Typically seems to be what we see as the major sort of breaches. And even the ASD, I think, said the top cybercrime type for business was email compromisation. So when a staff member has been sent an email that gets through a spam filter and they end up clicking a link on it, putting in a username and password, if you didn't have multi-factor authentication or a certain hardening measure like geo-blocking, things like that in place, you're essentially, by doing that without, and it's obviously not on purpose, but you're essentially opening up your entire email login to the globe. So I think it's important to note that alongside that, I think business email compromisation seems to be the second top as well. So understanding what that looks like and how to mitigate, it comes down to, again, the reason I think, I guess crime organizations are going to focus on these areas is because it allows for human error.
Let's talk about that for a sec. So what actually motivates these criminals?
Oh, look, as I said before, they're definitely the data. Being able to sell data, client information, sensitive information. Depending on the business you are, you're going to have a load of sensitive information, be it client data around changes in their business about, could be changes in directorship, could be changes of ownership, it could be bank accounts, all sorts of information that can be accessed or that people would like to access and either sell on the dark web or ransom back. So depending on what it is, I mean, to be perfectly frank, most of our usernames and passwords are probably out there for sale already. So making sure you've got mitigation strategies in place, such as multi-factor authentication, hardening around your logins, such as I mentioned, geolocation or geo-blocking and impossible travel and things like that, just helps strengthen your profile, but also make sure that even if you do succumb to a human error in your business, that at least you're protected from a basic level as well.
Yeah. So when you get that message pop up, would you like two-factor authentication? And you got the yes or later. Don't click later.
If you haven't entered your username and password into one of your login screens, you shouldn't be accepting a two-factor. And that's where the human error comes out. It could be someone standing at the checkout at Coles or Woolies and they just see it pop up and they go, yes, it's me. We've had clients that in a similar vein have had staff members that have done that. They've clicked on a link, they've entered their username, password, an hour later they get a two-factor for it, and automatically it's a prompt. So there's mitigation strategy around that. Is if that staff member is identified to have clicked it, obviously they, whoever's logging in from outside of Australia, or if we identify it malicious, it gets shut down. But again, the mitigation would be to maybe remove the prompt in the MFA. Or the multi-factor authentication, so that to authorize a multi-factor authentication, you actually have to log into the application itself rather than it just prompting you and you just saying, yes, it's me. So there's a lot of different strategies you can look at around the human error topic or side of things. And I think the first side, and one of, as I said, the major parts of a cyber insurance questionnaire or spreadsheet or checklist is what are you doing around human risk management? So, and it's such a small cost to get one of these little licenses that does the dark web monitoring, human risk, or sorry, beg your pardon, phishing simulation, as well as security awareness training. So super simple tool, but very effective.
Okay. And look, I still remember, a good friend, Jamie Beresford from Practice Protect. He talks about that they're all about tricking people, aren't they? I still remember him. You mentioned something then that I went into. Yes, people get tricked. And I think that's what they're working on. You mentioned the scenario there of the people at the checkout at Woolies or whatever it may, or Coles. And it's right. You're busy. You're doing 10 different things. You've got the kids yelling at you and you look at this. Oh, yeah, that's right. Bang. And that's how they trick you into things, don't they?
Yeah, look, it's a certain type of social engineering. We've had reports from clients that when new staff start with them, if they're put on their website, if they're put on their LinkedIn, anywhere, the amount of spam that effectively gets pulled up is outrageous. It's these I guess organizations that are attempting um, to gain access, or at least steal information. They're scanning the web constantly, looking for people that are potentially susceptible to falling for one of their sort of social engineering tricks, or their phishing
Yes.
emails.
Yeah. So, mate, let's talk about some of the recommendations. What sort of recommendations can you provide to everyone online that's to avoid eCrime?
Yeah, look, it's a really good question. I think what the ASD and the ACSC have put together around the modeling for Essential 8. The Essential 8 is sort of 8 areas that you, as a business, as any business that holds sensitive data, you should be focused on in terms of protecting your data, but also protecting your business and your clients. I think their framework is really important. Now, I think from July 1, 2025, there will be auditing put in place. What the outcome of that is still unclear of as yet. I think at the moment we're probably sitting around 30% of our clients at Essential 8 compliance, where we would hope by the end of this year we would have at least 60 and by close to 90% by July 1, 2025. What I would say is that their framework is an important framework to really set, I guess, a benchmark of what a firm or what a business should be doing. I think what we do from a security perspective is we when we onboard clients, obviously this is mine and my partner's business that's affected. We have a non-negotiable bare minimum level of security. That security entails eyes on screen every month. It means that you've got multi-factor authentication, you've got endpoint detection and response, the AI tool I was talking about earlier. You've got remote monitoring management, the human risk management, which is the security awareness training, as well as simulated phishing and dark web monitoring it, as well as domain or DKIM, which is locking down your domains. So in terms of a bare minimum, that's where we look, as that's a non-negotiable from our business. I guess over the next sort of 12 to 18 months, that non-negotiable will change, because as this security posture, or our security posture as a country changes, we become more of a hot topic, or a hot target, I should say, for any of these organizations. So I think the Essential 8 framework is a very good baseline, and that's where I would like to say all of our clients will be at July 1 next year. It's a good baseline if you haven't talked about it with your IT company, to say, what do we need to do to get there? I think that sort of basic level, that our non-negotiable gets you most of the way there in terms of what you need in place from a licensing perspective. There are a few additionals like your application whitelisting, DMARC, and a few others. However, again, a large part of what the Essential 8 is going to cover is also documentation. So making sure that you've got a clear plan in case of business continuity, in case of an outage, in case of a potential event, ensuring you've got an incident response plan, you've got your disaster recovery planning, you've got password policies. All of these things need to be in place for businesses to ensure that there's a clear, I guess, structure and a clear process that needs to be followed, that in the event of an attack, this is what happens, or this is, revert back to the policy. So I think that's really what we focus on a lot with our clients, is making sure their documentation is correct alongside their security posture as a business as well.
Yeah, good and well said. I think the Essential 8 we spoke about might have been this time last year, actually, and not a lot of people had heard about it. Came into play 1 July this year, didn't it?
Yeah, it did. It did. I mean, look, it's been talked about for many years. It's a moving target though, where as the ASD identifies areas of concern or areas of vulnerability, it then sort of adds in additional protocols that you need to follow. I know the latest one was probably March this year, which was application whitelisting and ring fencing, which is the opposite to blacklisting, where you sort of blacklist certain products. This is whitelisting, where these are the only acceptable applications and software that you can use. So, by adding that in, it means that, again, you've got an additional security hardening mechanism behind what staff are able to do and what they're able to access and things like that to help block potential malicious attacks, I guess.
Okay. And so, look, a lot of businesses would rely on companies like yours. They'll say, well, that's the responsibility of our IT company. How much can leaders push on to IT companies like yours, or take responsibility themselves and have companies like yours support them? Where does that sit? Because I know, a lot of people that I would talk to say, "Oh, no, our IT company's got that sorted. I don't have to worry about it."
Yeah, absolutely. Look, it's a really good question. We're seeing a bit of a shift at the moment, especially probably the larger side of town, where generally they would have an internal IT team sort of focused on what we do. They're now looking at outsourcing because it allows them to mitigate their risk. It allows them to ensure that they're getting the right advice. A lot of the times when you've got an internal IT firm, you won't have anyone doing the long-term strategy and the documentation piece and long-term mitigation. They're sort of retrospectively looking at a break-fix solution. So they're so consumed with ensuring the firm's up and running, they're not in future planning or future protecting the firm. So I think we speak and we work with firms that are sort of 10 staff to a couple of hundred, and that seems to be increasing now. And I think having an outsourced IT and managed security provider is an important part of, from board level, mitigating the risk of directors at the same time. Because with this Essential 8 compliance next year, I believe that directors can be held accountable for their firm's security profile. That, again, is changing at the moment. So look, if that was to happen, for directors of businesses to ensure that they're compliant, but also ensure that compliance is left to, I guess, an industry professional, is a really good risk mitigation strategy for any firm, really.
Yep. And that's going to be federal?
It's national, yeah.
Yeah, national. Okay, brilliant. So, mate, the tech sector closely followed by, let's say, the financial sector, which we've worked in, and you mentioned the legal profession in there as well. So two of the targeted industries, let's say. How are you continuing to protect yourselves so you can protect your clients?
Yeah, a good question. I mean, look, we don't sell what we don't preach what we don't do. A large amount of what we do, and especially managing our own cloud infrastructure, it's important from our perspective that we are at the highest level of security. So what we do with clients, it comes down to consulting. It's understanding what they want, where they want to be, and what that roadmap journey looks like. I think even just to be compliant for Essential 8, it's about a 3-month project, because it relies on reporting back every single month that these measures are in place to ensure that we've got a continuity of reporting showing that the measures all in place that are set out through the framework are there. So from our perspective, absolutely, it's super important that we are, I guess, on the leading edge and not the bleeding edge of what that security looks like, especially with the clients that we work with. When we're talking the larger sort of financial side of things, you're talking legal firms which have incredibly sensitive documents. Ensuring that we're providing that detail or the same level of detail to all of our clients is one of the formats that we brought in terms of what we consult back to our clients. We ensure that this is documented the entire way. So as I said, look, the same reason that every accountant and legal professional documents everything that they do, we do the same thing from our end.
Okay. And I suppose there's like anything in life, and we saw it happen 10 days ago with that patch, let's call it. Was that only to do with Microsoft?
No, well, it was only to do with CrowdStrike clients. So we only had one client affected.
And the knock-on effect was those users, was it?
No, well, we were able to mitigate it because we just rebooted the firewall and controlled from what we do. But in terms of what I mean, when you're talking about, say, Woolies, it's got got hundreds of thousands of potential checkouts. It's a lot harder to reboot that than it is to reboot a client of our size. So from our perspective, it was a CrowdStrike issue that didn't work with the Microsoft users that were obviously had CrowdStrike deployed in their businesses.
Yep, yep. And it's probably fair to assume that most people nowadays would be looking at insurance. Is that something that is just a non-negotiable now with every company?
I think it would have to be. Yeah, I mean, cyber insurance, I know the premiums are going up. And we hear from our clients all the time. Our projects team are actually filling out the insurance documents when they come through about what's in place, what's in project, what's being deployed already. So in terms of cyber insurance, I mean, we've seen the changing, I guess, profile of what they are looking at to ensure that you can lower your premiums. That's something that we actively help our clients every time the annual renewal comes up. And as I've mentioned, quite a few of those areas, that's what they are looking at. And look, again, similar to majority of tenders that we see, if clients are tendering for financial work or if they're tendering for government work, ensuring this compliance with Essential 8 is a large amount of the IT infrastructure part of any of these tenders that we've been seeing and helping our clients fill out.
Yeah, so a bit like what you mentioned before in terms of if at a board level, risk mitigation is one of those key things, you must have cyber, IT, tech all included in that as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. Mate, you spoke about phishing techniques before, and I spoke about the ability to obviously trick people. Let's talk phishing techniques, tricking legitimate users to target valid accounts, as well as authentication and identifying data. How do they conduct these attacks?
Yeah, look, we see more and more, and I think I touched on it before, is controlling and locking down your domain name. And how some people are able to, I guess, get around that is by changing a letter in a name or a letter in a domain name. And so an E to an A as an example. And it appears to be from your email, from say a CEO's email. It's purporting to say, go and purchase some Apple gift cards for the team or whatever it might be. There are ways that I think people have been using this for quite some time, and it could be to clients. If they've got a client list out of you, if they've seen clients mentioned on the website, anything like that. I think the social engineering factor of the phishing attempts is, it's to effectively trick or to convince you to enter in details or to provide information about something sensitive that they can then use for their monetary gain or for whatever gain they're looking at. So I think, phishing attempts, spam filter, and having a solid spam filter in place is obviously a mitigation strategy around it. It doesn't always stop spam emails getting through. As I mentioned before, the human risk management side of or the license that we do does a simulated phishing. It's a simulated phishing tool as well. So what it does is every week, 2 weeks, 4 weeks, however frequently you set it, is that it sets out or sends out an email that is a phishing email, but it allows it to go through the spam filter. And what it does is it reports back on staff and how many staff have clicked through, how many entered in usernames, passwords, and it allows you to manage it from a training perspective. So you can then, from that point, you can choose to push out more emails to a particular staff member that seems to be vulnerable to these, or you can push out more training awareness. And we've seen it with one client that launched it. I think it was something like 60 of their staff clicked and entered in details in the first week, which, it shows that human error, and I say human error, but it is human mistake, is sort of a major area that and this is why it's sort of targeted at phishing and I guess social engineering it's an area that people are susceptible to. I mean, some of these emails can look like it's from major freight companies. It could look like it's from Ozpo. It could look like it's from anyone. But it might be a malicious attack. And I think sometimes checking that it's a secured domain is definitely a way to mitigate it. But I think just having these tools in place for your staff is certainly, if they're not already in place, it should be an area that you're asking to focus on with your IT company.
Yeah, you've triggered me to something that happened. Oh, it was probably about 4 years ago now, 5 years ago, and I thought about it at the time. It was from PayPal. So I got what I thought was a legitimate email from PayPal asking me to look at and transfer money. And I actually thought about it before actually acting on it. And you're right. If you've got the time, because a lot of us are time poor and we are just
Mm.
acting. And I suppose that's how they trick us. But I still remember asking someone, and maybe I was in the office or something. I said, do you think this is legitimate? And the first thing they went to was the email address. And it was a series of different numbers and different letters. And it wasn't from no reply at PayPal as an example.com. It's like, that I've just been scammed with. That's exactly right. So it's just a numbers game, really, isn't it? There's probably
Yeah.
hundreds of thousands of people sitting
Oh,
in spaces offshore just trying to trick people.
yeah, absolutely. And I mean, it's not just that. I think from an individual level, I've spoken to friends and family who, if they've sold something on Facebook Marketplace, they'll have someone say, "Oh, it's locked up in a business account. You'll need to send, $500 to this account, and that'll release the $1,000 as an example that you'll then receive." So, I think that social engineering, you constantly dealing with, I guess, people that are trying to convince you otherwise, or trying to maliciously take something from you. So I think it's again the security awareness training stuff. It seems and it sounds so simple, but yet so effective in just making sure that people are more aware of the types of attacks. Because again, you try and stay one step ahead of how people are trying to access data and access your bank accounts effectively.
Yeah.
And I think ensuring that your staff are across that as well. It can cost you a lot down the path, I guess.
Yeah, true. So let's talk, what does a vulnerable landscape look like? And what sort of landscape should all businesses start to have in place?
Look, I would say as a bare minimum, there's, if I look down and I've got one of the cyber insurers that works with a few of our clients, even just having a look down their list, making sure that you don't have end of life or unsupported systems and software or hardware, ensuring that you've got vulnerability scanning. And I mean, penetration testing's a little bit different. So penetration testing is testing for vulnerabilities. I think all businesses should be looking at penetration testing at least as an annual once off. What it does is, if with your IT company, the vulnerability or the report will come back with all the vulnerabilities that the penetration test has found, and that will be testing all endpoints. So if you've got servers, it'll test the servers as an endpoint. If you've got laptops and computers, it'll test all the laptops and computers to identify if there's vulnerabilities. I think that's important to do once a year. But just having your standard, endpoint detect and response tool, which is the AI antivirus that I talked about earlier, making sure you've got the cybersecurity training in place. Multi-factor authentication is just a non-negotiable. I think if any business is out there that hasn't got that at the moment, you're open to, you're open to the world effectively. And then privileged access controls is very definitely an important one. We look at that as in terms of conditional access. So what certain staff members are able to access, what certain ones can't. So when we were talking about Copilot earlier, and I mentioned that there's a potential risk in Copilot to circumvent some security measures, it would be, say, an administration assistant who's able to search wage reviews, as an example, or performance plans. And if they were to search that in Copilot without having these metrics or these measures in place, it could potentially circumvent that hardening of security and pull that data for the wrong people. So privileged access is certainly an important control to have in place. And then ensuring you've got patch management. As well as, sorry, I can't forget business continuity planning. Just making sure that and this is just basic documentation stuff that most, if not all, businesses should have in place already, but ensuring that you know what to do business continuity isn't just cyber events. It could be flooding, it could be earthquake, it could be just a internet outage. What happens then? If you've got staff, you need to communicate. They need to be aware of the policy. So if it's, hey, internet's out of the office, everyone work from home, at least you know what those plans are.
It's a good point. It's a good point. And I suppose maybe think about, obviously there's sort of the Profit Master team. They're based in the Philippines. I know there was a typhoon that went through the Philippines yesterday. So what's the plans there in terms of internet going down? You know, nowadays, I suppose internet going down, you're at home and there you go. Well, there you go. I can't work. You know,
Well,
those are the things that can affect you, aren't they?
well, and if you think at that level as well, if you've got servers on site that get completely damaged by a flood or whatever it might be,
Yep.
what's your disaster recovery plan? So how do you spin up another environment, and what does that look like? So I think ensuring that you're just covered from a continuity perspective is ensuring that your staff are also aware of what the process and policies are in place.
Yeah. Good point. And now James just went through quite a few number of, I don't know, about 10 things that you reeled off there, which are probably more common language to you, probably not as common language to us. So again, this will be up on our YouTube page in the next 48 hours. So if you want to go back and have a look at the replay and document some of the things that James just spoke about, then please make sure you do that. I'll even send you a note just to make sure you can go back, because there's quite a bit of detail in this that you would then start to understand, especially when you start doing your searches or whoever you're going to delegate this to make sure you've got all this in place. We're going to go to questions pretty soon. So if you've got any questions for James on this particular topic, please drop them into the Q&A. That's going to be really important. James, before we wrap up, mate, just talking a little bit more about, let's talk compliance. Now, you're a director of a company. Let's call it agenda items for board meetings. What can you share in terms of what should be for today and future compliance requirements?
Look, in terms of from a board level, I think all directors should be aware of their security profile and I guess security posture as a business. I think having ongoing discussions about implementation and ongoing projects. IT is not just reactive; it's not just support. It's as I said, future planning. It's future proofing effectively your business and ensuring that you're again at the leading edge and not the bleeding edge. So I think at that board level, it's understanding what your requirements are. Financial services obviously going to have a higher requirement than, say, an engineer down the road. So I think understanding what that level is and having open communication with your IT company. I think what we do from our business perspective is we've got a very strict, I guess, CSM, which is a client success manager position that every quarter we meet, and it's not a sales role by any means. I would hate to think it's ever thought that way, because it's definitely not. But what it's there to do is it's to ascertain feedback about our business. It's continuous improvement from our perspective, but also continuous improvement for clients. It's being able to knowledge share changes in market and I guess automation. Going back to your comment earlier, Paul, especially in the with the firms that we work with across legal and accounting, it's what's new in market. So it's a knowledge sharing role. If you've got an open communication and a structure set in place from a relationship management perspective with your IT company, I think that feedback and those summaries shared at a board level keep you informed, but also keep you ahead of, especially at that board level, keep you sort of at that leading edge. So I think that's a very important sort of area to ensure that you know and understand your requirements as a business, but also that you know your future requirements, because as I said, it is a changing environment and it's not going to get any easier, unfortunately.
I'd agree. So let's say you sort of mentioned financial services has got a different requirement, let's say to an engineer down the road. Where do I go to find that requirement to start off with? If I'm
The requirement that I'm sort of referencing there is the requirements of their clients. So if they're working with certain other financial organizations, if they're under tender, if they're under contract, or they've contracted themselves to a level of security, their requirement of deployment and having things in the correct things as per the contract in place, that would be more so their compliance. As I guess from an essential A perspective, again, if all companies were sitting at that maturity level one, again, it's a framework. So you've got different maturity levels. There's a 0, 1, 2, 3, 3 levels of maturity. Some tenders, some clients, again, require you, a government agency as an example, will require you to be at a maturity level 2. So ensuring that you understand what the difference is between getting to that maturity level 1 and then further hardening, further, I guess, licenses, further documentation around what level 2 looks like. It's a roadmap journey. So that's a reference between sort of a financial company as opposed to the engineering company, but same rules apply. If that engineering company's got sensitive government contracts, like I know, major engineering companies would have certain level of Department of Defense clearance. So a completely different requirement again. So I think each business is and their agreements with their clients are going to dictate what those levels of, I guess, security deployment and, I guess, compliance looks like.
Okay. Right, thank you.
That's right.
Questions. Got a couple of questions coming through. What is your view on VPNs and if they are good for security or unnecessary?
Um,
Good old VPNs.
it's a good question. It depends on what environment you're accessing. If you're overseas accessing a cloud in Australia, say our private cloud, yes, a VPN does help and does add additional layers to security. I think again, it's a complex question that I think dependent on that environment and what that environment looks like that you are accessing will depend on the level of security. I don't think any measure, small or large, of additional layers of security is a bad one. I think it's a VPN when you're accessing public networks is obviously a preferred measure, but again, dependent or not knowing the environment is it's difficult to say whether it's necessary and what we'll do differently.
Okay. Another question. What is your view on password managers?
Password managers are good. Look, we offer a password manager as an advanced security measure. Password managers for businesses, I think, are a good measure. I think, seeing the LastPass data leak last year, there's obviously risks. It doesn't matter what business you're working with. Even working with CrowdStrike, you had an outage last week. So I think password managers and ensuring password policy is in place, I think is probably a better measure. But I do think that password managers are a really good addition to having to any security profile. But I think, again, making sure that you have a clear password policy in place. It's changed every 3 to 6 months. Ensuring things like that are in place in your business is probably the first port of call. But a password manager does add an additional layer to that.
I was going to ask you about that in terms of, the change in security and passwords, how often that should be. So you just mentioned 3 to 6 months.
Yeah. Look, it's a tough one with two-factor authentication. It takes away a bit of the frequent changes, and when you start talking that you're changing passwords to 14 characters and it's this, this and that, and I say, me personally, I prefer every 6 months. We've got clients that do it every 3 months. I think looking at the business impact to changing every 3 months, again, make that decision business to business on what you feel is right. But yeah, I think every 6 months at a minimum for me is sort of where I sit.
Okay, brilliant. Mate, thank you. Now, James, before we go to any final comments, I know that you joined us last year at the Profit Master conference. I know they've got their 10-year anniversary conference approaching in September. It's hard to believe we're in August at the end of this week. So we're only about 6 weeks away from heading back to the Philippines. You'll be on a panel that I'll be hosting. What are you talking about, mate?
Very similar conversation of what we've just talked about. I think, look, again, it's a constantly changing environment, this security landscape. But I think when we talk what you can do and I guess make it very, subject matter specific when we get over there, it's very much driven by current media reports. It's driven by current issues in market. You've brought up CrowdStrike, no doubt. Touch wood, it's not anyone we know, but no doubt there will be another one in the next 6 weeks. So I think that we'll keep it topical. And again, it's updating around the mitigation strategies that we put in place with clients and helping understand why we do that and what their requirements are from a business perspective. So
fair call. I know before we went live, you spoke about Mr. Pardis. Shout out to Mr. Pardis if he's watching, or we'll give him a shout out on socials later. But I know you'll be joining the panel with Michael Pardis as well. So it's going to be a fun little 2 to 3 days up where are we? In Clark, aren't we? We're in Clark. Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah. So
looking forward to it.
Yeah, it should be good. Mate, any final comments before we look to sign off?
No, I appreciate you getting me on. It's always lovely to chat to you, Paul. But look, I guess if anyone does want further information, we've got a full security brochure that covers off all areas of what we've discussed today and more. There are significant advanced areas that sort of add additional layers. So if anyone's looking to that, if they can reach out to you, that would be great. I'm more than happy to share that with them.
Well, if you send that to me, and what I'll do is to everybody that's online, I'll reach out with a quick email saying thank you, opt in, just reply with a yes, thanks, PJ. And then I will send that to you directly from James. And if people want to reach out to you directly, mate, what's the best way to get you? LinkedIn
Yeah.
or? Yep.
Yeah, look, via email, james.h@ctgroup.com.au is great. But yeah, LinkedIn, any socials through the website, ctgroup.com.au.
Yep. And as you can see, Hey spelled Hey. So make sure you check out James, connect with him. And yeah, look, that framework that he just mentioned, that brochure, I'll send that to you guys following this as well. So let me just check to see if there's any other questions. No, I don't believe so. You want to throw one in there quickly? You can. Otherwise, James, mate, thanks again. I think it's a really interesting, changing subject. And I know we've spoken about this a little bit over the last few years. And I suppose when you see those big companies, whether it's a CrowdStrike, you know, I don't think people realize how big that company is, or whether it's a Optus or whether it's a Medibank, you know, these are big companies. I'm sure it's happening where to a lot of small companies we don't even hear about because it doesn't hit the media. So it's all about providing everybody online with, again, an update to the sorts of things that you should be thinking about. That Essential 8 program, which is going to be critical to all businesses, again, depending on the industry that you work in. Then, mate, I just wanted to say thank you for joining us. Again, your insights are amazing. The recording will be on our YouTube page in the next 48 hours or so. Thank you to everyone that joined us. Thank you, James Hay. Signing off. I'll see you next time. Please enjoy the rest of your day.
Join us at Profit Master. Passionate people, passionate careers.